Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor. We've got plenty tonight about the indictment that we saw handed down yesterday by Special Counsel Jack Smith against former President Donald Trump. We're going to speak with John Salem from Just the News about that, as well as Representative Claudia Tenney, Republican out of New York. So sit tight. We've got plenty of coverage of the actual indictment and the legal aspects of it. But I want to pause for a moment and discuss with you a part of the media coverage on this that is really starting to rub me the wrong way. And maybe it's rubbing you the wrong way too, you just haven't noticed yet. It's this phrase I keep hearing, that this is disqualifying for President Trump. It's disqualifying for someone running for president. We've heard it from the left really since the 2016 election. Anything you heard from Donald Trump was immediately disqualifying. When he made his first speech after coming down that golden escalator at Trump Tower and spoke the truth about how we needed a wall at the southern border to manage our out-of-control illegal immigration, I remember commentators immediately saying it's disqualifying what he said. When he went toe-to-toe with Megyn Kelly during a debate, and then some of the unfortunate things he said about Megyn Kelly afterwards, I saw people say this is disqualifying. When the Access Hollywood tape came out, pretty much everybody in the media declared that it disqualified Donald Trump from being president. And of course, while we know what happened that election night, you, the American people, we had the final word. Well, now I'm seeing it all over again. Yes, of course, from the media. Yes, of course, from Democrats and the left. This is disqualifying. The fact that he's indicted is disqualifying. The fact that he's been indicted twice, oh, forget about it. Now we have these federal charges over January 6th. It's disqualifying. Even friends of mine, conservative commentators who probably were never really in favor of Donald Trump being president, they are now taking this and saying things like, oh, I'm sure you've seen it. If even half of the things in this indictment are true, it's disqualifying. Actually, let's pause on that for a moment. Acknowledge what they're saying here. If even half of the things in the indictment are true. This is a document from a special counsel from the Justice Department filed in a federal court. Why wouldn't all of it be true? Here we've got people actually trying to equivocate in some way, at the same time disqualifying Donald Trump, yet at the same time also acknowledging that the Justice Department could very well be lying about Donald Trump. But no, the most important thing is to disqualify President Trump. I beg you to please be wary of any political commentator, any pundit, any television host, radio host, columnist, some guy they've got on a panel on cable news. Be wary of any of them who tell you that any item in the news or any characteristic of any politician is disqualifying. They shouldn't even be allowed on the ballot, and you certainly shouldn't vote for them because of this thing. It disqualifies them. Forget about not voting for them. You shouldn't even consider voting for them. That's what they're trying to tell you. Like I said, it's what they told you in 2016, and well, you had different thoughts at the time. As well you should. Do you know what is disqualifying for a presidential candidate? There actually is an answer to that question. It's in our Constitution. If you're under 35 years old, that is disqualifying. If you are not a natural-born citizen of the United States of America, by the way, something that still hasn't really been officially defined by our Supreme Court, well, that would also make you disqualified. And under the 14th Amendment, if you're a previous office holder of any federal office and you swore to defend the Constitution and then have been found guilty of insurrection, well, that would also disqualify you from office. This, of course, the 14th Amendment was ratified right after the Civil War. Although even that disqualification has a get-out-of-jail-free clause. If 2/3 of Congress, both houses, vote to overturn it in your case, then you would be allowed to run for office. And that's it. Literally, that's it. Nothing else disqualifies you. You could be president of the United States and serve from inside a jail cell. Nothing else disqualifies you. So when you hear a commentator, when you hear a pundit, when you see some idiot on your Facebook page saying, "That's it, I'm done, it's over, this is disqualifying," what they're really trying to tell you is, based on my standards, my principles, my opinion, my arbitrary biases, I'm trying to intimidate you and bully you away from supporting this particular person. And since I've tried to persuade you with my brilliance, my knowledge, my logic, my reason, and you still won't agree with me, well, now I'm going to shame you. I'm going to tell you that this person is so out of bounds and so outrageous and so unacceptable that he just disqualified himself from holding office. And you're supposed to accept that. You're supposed to say, oh, well, in that case, if he's disqualified. I mean, maybe it's me. But if everything they're throwing at Donald Trump right now, which, by the way, the latest polls show that the majority of Americans, that includes Democrats, by the way, believe that the charges against Donald Trump are politically motivated. But if I'm to believe that all the charges against Donald Trump right now disqualify for him from office, then what am I to make of the fact that Joe Biden, it appears, accepted a bribe from a foreign nation in exchange for favorable treatment from the federal government? Why is that never called disqualifying? What am I supposed to make of Joe Biden lying over and over and over again about his relationship with his son's business interests and his participation in his son's business? After all, we just found out yesterday that one of his son's businesses purchased a phone for President Biden when he was vice president. Now, that means Vice President Joe Biden had a company phone for his son's businesses. Doesn't that mean he was in business with his son, even though they keep denying it? Why is that not disqualifying? Heck, why is a Secretary of State using a private email server for all of her classified top secret correspondence with foreign nations and with entities inside the U.S. government, including the CIA and the FBI, and then deleting 30,000 of her emails? Why isn't that disqualifying? Isn't it fascinating how the disqualifying only goes in one direction and not in the other? It's almost like this whole use of the word disqualifying is a political weapon, a cudgel that's only used in one direction in our political dialogue and not the other. You know, like how the FBI and the DOJ are used. Yeah. I beg you, ignore anyone who tries to tell you that a candidate is disqualified, that their behavior is disqualifying. What they're really trying to do is tell you how to vote. They're trying to tell you how to think. And, well, you're better than that. Other than those three provisions in the U.S. Constitution that clearly spells out the criteria for a presidential candidate, the only other entity in this entire country that has the say as to what is disqualifying and what is not disqualifying is you and me. We, the people. When we go to vote, we'll have our voices heard, and we'll pick our candidate, and we'll cast a ballot. And if those ballots are accurately counted, there will be a winner and there will be a loser. And the loser will have been disqualified. Not by a cable news pundit, not by a columnist, and not by a talk radio host, and not by your liberal brother-in-law on your Facebook page. No, that candidate will have been disqualified by us, the way it's supposed to be. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. Keep it here. You're watching the Salem News Channel. America is still reacting to the extraordinary federal charges levied by Special Counsel Jack Smith yesterday. 4 charges, all related to the aftermath of the 2020 presidential election and targeting former President Donald Trump. Joining us right now out of New York State. All members of Congress are back home. They must be so happy to be in their district. She's Representative Claudia Tenney. Congresswoman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on again.
It's hard not to see this as political, especially since it's all about the aftermath of the 2020 election. What's in this indictment that we didn't know 2 years ago, let alone 6 months ago? The timing's impeccable.
Absolutely nothing. And that's because we had that bombshell testimony out of Devin Archer connecting the dots and linking Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, which is what it's all about. Joe Biden is the one in the position of influence. It's influence peddling We know that we have evidence of bribery, and they're doing everything they can. The Department of Justice, remember, who is appointed by Biden but served the American people, not the Biden family, is running for cover in every instance, whether it's to slow walk and prevent the whistleblowers from the IRS from getting to the evidence they needed. Now it's trying to prevent Devin Archer. They interfered on Saturday and said, "Oh my goodness, we can't have him testify. We got to send him to jail right away." Then they backed out of that because that's obstruction of justice, of course. So it's really all about the Department of Justice trying to protect Joe Biden and the inevitable link that we all see, whether it's the suppressing the laptop all the way back to 2019, putting out the 51 so-called former intelligence agents who should all lose their security clearance absolutely for what they did, for lying and doing and engaging in this type of obstruction as well. And yet they're charging President Trump with these sort of flimsy looking charges that are, they're antiquated, never been really used before. And they also violate President Trump's First Amendment rights. And as you say, Larry, why didn't they charge him 2.5 years ago? Oh, why? Because he's the front runner in the Republican nomination to become our nominee on the Republican side. Yeah. And, he's beating Joe Biden in the polls. So that we got to take him out. And he's an existential threat to the Democrats and the deep state.
Well, listen, I appreciate you spending as much time in that answer talking about the Biden crimes, because that is what we should be paying attention to. It's what we had been paying attention to all week. That's why this is so suspicious. I'm sure you've seen the timeline. The last 3 charges brought on by Jack Smith have all come literally the day after a horrible legal day for the Biden family.
Absolutely. These are all rolled out. This is coordinated, calculated. It almost reminds me of a RICO situation on using federal employees. You have, that's the racketeering, influence, corrupt statute that is often used for organized crime. But when you see anytime something comes out that is looks bad for Joe Biden, all of a sudden everybody rushes in the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland. And remember, these people really all report to Merrick Garland, whether it's the AG down in Delaware who didn't want to charge Hunter Biden and then dredged up the plea deal right before the whistleblowers came out. Now, every time Jack Smith rolls out some kind of phony charges against Trump, just like the plea deal was just a disaster. So really, that's what it's all about. And I think the American people I think people are starting to realize it. But look, it's all going to come down to process in the end, and whether we can get our voters out and get people to understand what's happening. Because if you watch other channels, they're not talking about this. They're talking about, random countries and things happening there that nobody cares about.
The Congresswoman, based on that, would you join? Some of your colleagues are saying, when we get back into session, we should defund the special counsel's office. Let's use our power of the purse strings and defund Jack Smith's operation. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think defunding you got to be careful with it, because we have very good people who serve in those positions who are at the mercy of people like Merrick Garland, Jack Smith. But, why don't we have a special counsel appointed for this Biden situation? Look at what we have put together, whether it's through James Comer's suspicious activities report, from the Oversight Committee. Jason Smith put out the whistleblowers in the Ways and Means Committee, on which I serve. I'm on the Oversight Committee of the Ways and Means Committee. They revealed all this, putting it all together. The bombshell document that Senator Grassley put out showing the FBI informant linking Joe Biden and his son. Honestly, Hunter Biden's not going to make $83,000 a year with Burisma if it weren't for Joe Biden.
$83,000 a month. $83,000 a month.
A month, right? Let me.
And by the way, he probably couldn't make $83,000 a year anywhere if his last name weren't
Absolutely.
Biden.
Well, except he's a painter now, right? Don't you think that? Honestly, this is my guess, and this is an opinion. I think that's another money laundering scheme. I don't even believe Hunter Biden's making those paintings. I think that's a way to funnel money to the Bidens. But here's the thing. I think we first have to impeach and remove Merrick Garland, because he's the dirty cop right now who is causing all this obstruction. He's the one that's preventing us from getting to the truth, because we ultimately need to impeach and remove Joe Biden. But we can't do that until we get to all the evidence. And I think that's what Merrick Garland, Jack Smith, all the DOJ is doing. They're running interference, they're running cover, they're running a quasi-RICO operation to make sure they protect Joe Biden. That is not the role of the DOJ. The DOJ's job is to serve the American people, equal justice under the law, and we're not getting that.
All right, you keep raising the specter of RICO. You better start moving to defund these guys if it's RICO, but I hear you.
Well, look, Yeah, definitely. I mean, we can defund that operation, but the problem with defunding is, how are we going to have the money to go forward with the Joe Biden
Yeah.
operations?
You mentioned your position on the Ways and Means Committee, and I do think Chairman Smith has done an excellent job making sure that everything is done and rolled out properly with these whistleblowers. Gary Shapley, the first whistleblower yesterday, was on television saying that he knows firsthand there are many other whistleblowers who have been intimidated by the FBI, who won't come forward because they're terrified of what might happen to them. What can your committee or anyone in Congress do to protect these men and women?
Well, here, first of all, we are trying to protect them. It was the first whistleblower came out, was able to, through his attorney, he revealed who he was, by the way, from upstate New York, in my old district, Norwich, New York. The second whistleblower did not want his identity revealed because he knew that he would be ambushed by media and threatened. And that's a huge problem. Look what they did to Devin Archer, who's, by the way, a criminal, but they were going to try to force him to go to jail early.
Yeah.
So that he couldn't testify. So Jason Smith, to his credit, he's our chairman. He opened this whistleblower portal for the IRS, for the whistleblowers to come forward. And the whole point of the whistleblower statute is to protect people who know something that's not right in government, and they're going to come forward with that knowledge so that we can maintain our oversight. And we're going to continue to do that with the Oversight Committee, the subcommittee from Ways and Means, and we should be continuing to do that on the Oversight Committee, the larger Oversight Committee that in the House. Yeah. And we're going to continue to do that. We've got to make that happen, and we've got to protect these whistleblowers because this is, I keep hearing, Merrick Garland came out yesterday, big crime, this is a big crime. No, the biggest criminal action in the history of this country is everything Joe Biden right now. Yeah. You thought Hillary Clinton was bad? This is terrible. Remember Richard Nixon? He didn't commit the crime. He committed the cover-up.
Yeah. Joe
Biden is committing a crime in plain sight, and he's using the government that he's controlling on the executive branch to cover it up. It's worse than anything we've ever seen in this country's history.
Yeah, crime, cover-up, obstruction of justice. It's right, and it's happening before our eyes, as you mentioned, the attempt to arrest Devin Archer. Devin Archer, by the way, when he did testify, he revealed unequivocally that multiple times, over 20 times, the president was on the phone and put on speakerphone when business associates were in the room with Hunter Biden. Now, your colleague, Dan Goldman, congressman from New York, part of your caucus there, he claims that they were just talking about the weather, therefore it's okay. Your understanding of the law, I'm curious, if you're accused of selling access, does it matter exactly what the contents of that phone call are? Or if you're selling the fact that you can get someone like the vice president on the phone, isn't that proof enough?
Well, we should get more evidence on that. But by the way, Loretta Lynch was only talking about her grandchildren when she made that special stop to meet with the president,
yes.
The prior president.
And Hillary Clinton was only making yoga appointments in her emails.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
She was talking about her grandchildren, too. Look, the problem with this is we already have evidence that's contrary to that. We have evidence from the laptop that actually states it's text messages from Joe Biden to his daughter saying, don't worry, I'm not going to split it halfway with you like I have to do with Dad, the big guy. I'm going to give it all to you. I'm going to transfer that money to you for what services does she do? Nothing. She's a Biden. Same thing that finally was unearthed yesterday that came up a long time ago. Remember the phone call that was revealed a long time ago between Joe Biden and Hunter when they said, it looks like we're in the clear now.
Oh, on the New York Times article about the Chinese associate.
Right. Yeah, finally, so we know Joe Biden is in the middle of this. Joe Biden set Hunter Biden up.
Yeah.
We just have to get the evidence to get there. And the DOJ is working like an organized crime organization to prevent us from getting that information.
All right. We are out of time, but Claudia Tenney, Congresswoman from New York, you're on fire when you're back in your home district. No wonder. In Washington, D.C., it's a tough place to really feel yourself. Thank you, Congresswoman. We'll be back with more here on O'Connor Tonight. So now that they have the Devin Archer testimony that seems to confirm a whole lot of what was in that laptop and what other witnesses have testified with regard to Hunter Biden's business dealings and his father's knowledge, if not outright involvement, what does the House of Representatives do next? Well, let's bring in John Salem. He's the founder of JustTheNews.com and has been following these stories for many years, well before we even knew of the laptop. John, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to be with you.
Well, what are your sources? It seems like we've got three committees at play here. We've got oversight, we've got judiciary, and we've got ways of means. What are your sources on Capitol Hill tell you in terms of what the roadmap forward might be with these investigations?
Well, that is a really good question. Let me first just pause for a second and understand what those Hill committees have achieved. It is now an irrefutable story now that Joe Biden lied his way into office in 2020. He gave the American public 5 seminal lies distributed through the news media, and all of them have been disproven. By the way, some of them disproven by the testimony of his son and some of his family's closest friends. And let me just give you those quickly because they're so important. My family didn't get money from China. Hunter Biden said that was a lie in his elocution last week before his plea deal fell apart. He said he got $664,000 for China in 1 year. James Comer put the bank records out, $1.3 million to the rest of the family. That's a big problem. I never met with my son's business partners. Both Rob Walker and Devin Archer now say that's a lie. Walker saw a Chinese meeting. Devin Archer saw 20 plus meetings or phone calls there. My son never did anything wrong. That was a big one. To the contrary, Hunter Biden called his father a lawyer by admitting he was involved in a long and an intentional tax scheme. He elocuted, he just couldn't get to plead because the judge blew up that plea deal. He said, I knew nothing about my son's business deals. That's simply not true. There's lots of text messages and things going on. That's a very important thing. And then finally, he and 51 of intelligence experts aligned with him in his campaign said the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation. At the time they said it, that was patently false. Yeah. We had long sustained it. Those are 5 seminal lies. Joe Biden told the American people to become president. He lied during his job interview. That in and of itself is a consequential thing. Rolling back those 5 lies is a big, big moment for the American people. I think we got to absorb it and appreciate its impact on the 2024 election.
I think, John, that's a great point. It's a great recitation of these 5 important lies. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who say, oh, well, politicians lie. No, but these are consequential things about crimes and investigations and corruption. And by the way, no one in the media thought to actually challenge these lies. My favorite is that he claimed that he never talked to his son about his business and then adamantly said, we never made money from China. John, how did he know they never made money from China if he never talked to his son?
That's a brilliant thing. I never thought of it, but that's the perfect impeachment question, right? I mean, in the factual sense, not
in Congress, but yes, Chris Wallace, the debate moderator, could have very much made that point. Yeah.
Listen, Joe Biden was in a protection racket. The Weiss office was protecting him, the FBI was protecting him, the IRS was protecting him, and the American news media were protecting him. When this story is finally written for history, the news media will have been one of the largest aider and abettors in covering up the Biden family scandal for 4 years. It's now unraveling, but there was a cover-up in the news media. My colleagues, people I worked alongside of for decades, they were a major part of that cover-up.
Yeah. So we have testimony from whistleblowers on the tax case, but they also testified that they were stopped along the way by the FBI and the Justice Department. That's the obstruction aspect of it. We've got testimony from business partners. We've got bank records showing wire transfers. We've got the red flags from the banks saying, hey, there's something fishy about all these overseas transfers. We've got the 21 shell corporations. What's missing at this point to sort of put it all together and make the final argument?
Yeah, I think there are 3 seminal inquiries left to really resolve this before we determine whether there's going to be an impeachment inquiry. The first is, do the tapes exist? We have an FBI 1023 that says that Mykola Zlochevsky and his sidekick, as the owner of Burisma, a guy named Vadim Pozharsky, made tapes in which Joe Biden and Hunter Biden are doing the shakedown. If those tapes exist, that's a really big development. The second thing is, did Joe Biden get any money from this? There's a discussion in many quarters that there was $10 million set aside for Joe and his son Hunter. Hunter got payments. It's irrefutable. Burisma paid him. And by the way, he was being paid at $83,333 a month, which in 60 months would equal exactly $5 million, the figure that the informant. So now, is there $5 million for Joe somewhere there, and will it be found? Was it in cryptocurrency? Was it in an overseas bank account? That's the second question. The third big question is the current story that we've been force-fed since impeachment 2019 is that, Joe Biden fired the prosecutor, but he was only carrying out official U.S. policy when doing it. It had nothing to do with his son. Now, we learned from Devin Archer yesterday his son was being pressured to get rid of the prosecutor. That's a big change because it means Joe Biden's actions actually benefited exactly what Hunter Biden and his client were looking for. But if we find out I'm hinting at something that I might be soon be reporting.
Yeah, I'm leaning in. I'm leaning in.
Yeah,
John.
I can see. I'm trying to draw you in. That if we find out that Joe Biden actually took an action that was opposite of what the U.S. policy makers were saying at the time, those three seminal questions, how they're answered, will probably determine whether Congress moves to an impeachment proceeding or not.
Meanwhile, John Solomon, as you know, most of the cable news stations talking about American politics and legal wranglings right now as we speak are talking about a different case, Donald Trump and these charges from Jack Smith. I read earlier today on Just the News, though, that Mr. Smith had to admit a pretty major error in the last charges he put forth over classified documents. What's that all about?
Keep in mind this man's record. He was reversed 9-0, which means the liberal justices joined the conservative justice. That almost never happens in the Supreme Court, reversing the political conviction or the political corruption case against former governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell. That's very important because it creates a pattern for this prosecutor. Yesterday, Jack Smith went in and said, "Oh, Judge Cannon, the one handling the classified docket, oops, we told you something about evidence. It wasn't true. We didn't give all the evidence over to President Biden or President Trump, and we're going to give it to him now." That's a major. It's called a Brady violation. It's a major revelation in that case. And today, I think there's another very important thing. Remember what Jack Smith, when he sat at the podium last night in a news conference that I've never seen a prosecutor give like that before.
Yeah.
He said, President Trump willfully and knowingly lied. I know what was in President Trump's head, and I can prove he was committing fraud when he said, I think there was an election thing. There was an election fraud. He literally was pulling the wool over the American eyes, knowingly and willfully making a lie. There is new documents from Bernie Kerik. They were just turned over in the last 2 weeks. Jack Smith didn't seem to review them. You know why? He's not even interviewing Bernie Kerik about them until next week. But these documents show that on January 5th, the day before the events of January 6th, 2021, the investigative leads that they believe were unresolved election irregularity or fraud cases, and they knew they didn't have enough time to go get them themselves investigated, so they were working on a plan to get Congress, state legislators, and election regulators to look at that. If the chief investigator, Bernie Kerik, former NYPD commissioner, and the chief lawyer for Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, believed that these were active leads that needed to be investigated, it creates a state of consciousness that could very much undercut the argument Jack Smith just made. It's unbelievable Jack Smith would pull the trigger on the indictment before resolving this question with Bernie Kerik with an interview or a grand jury appearance.
Wow, we will certainly watch that story. By the way, you got to love the irony that Jack Smith just admitted in open court that he didn't hand over all of the documents to the defense, Donald Trump. Isn't that literally what those charges are? That Donald Trump didn't hand over all the documents back to the government? Also, you mentioned former Governor Bob McDonnell. I want to let our audience to know that the former governor will be our guest tomorrow on this program to talk about his situation with Jack Smith. It sheds a little bit more light on it. Real fast in our last minute here, Jack Smith said that he wants to move swiftly and have a quick trial. Any thoughts about what the Trump team might say? I would love for the Trump team to say, let's go, let's get it down now, but I doubt that's where they're headed.
There are such huge constitutional issues, presidential immunity, double jeopardy related to the impeachment trial, first speech issues. All of those are going to have to be litigated. Every lawyer I talked to last night told me, Democrat, Republican alike, this is going to be months after the 2024 elections over this particular case. And by the way, it's such a complicated case, it could affect the other case in Florida. You might have to ask for a stay on that because there's so many issues flying around and some of them are interconnected. I think Jack Smith is going to end up on the slow track on some of this.
My instinct is to be exhausted already, but I'm paid not to get exhausted. and if the American people aren't exhausted, I refuse to. John Solomon, thanks as always. JustTheNews.com. Thanks,
John. Larry.
There's more to come. Keep it here. O'Connor Tonight. Now, with all of the Trump indictment stuff blowing through the headlines yesterday, you missed developments, of course, in the ongoing case against Joe Biden and how he's leading toward impeachment. You also missed one other thing, a banner day yesterday in Bidenomics. The U.S. credit rating was reduced from AAA to AA+. And you know what that means. Neither do I. But E.J. Antoni does. He's a research fellow for the Center for Federal Budget over at Heritage Foundation. Why should I care about this, E.J.? It sounds bad.
Certainly. Well, as Kamala Harris put it, AAA rating is 3 letters and a AA rating is only 2 letters, and that's all you really need to know. So, but what makes that funny though is that's actually a believable explanation coming from the vice president. Unfortunately, though, this really is nothing to laugh about. This signifies that the United States is clearly not as good of a bet as people once believed it was. It used to be that government debt from the United States was considered the gold standard, and that's just not the case anymore. And people miss the fact that just because the United States is not going to explicitly default on its debt, meaning fail to actually give you dollars when they say they will, people have missed the fact that the dollars they give you can be worth much, much less than the dollars you originally lent them. And under Joe Biden, we have seen the United States dollar lose 16% of its value in a very short period of time. And so if you're an investor and you're going to be repaid with dollars that are worth 16% less, you are going to wonder, is the United States really a good bet anymore?
So here's why I'm sorry, EJ, I hate to do this to you and push back, but I've seen Joe Biden time and time again tell me that he has reduced the federal deficit. I would think that that would then have some positive impact on our debt. They should be giving us quadruple A ratings at this point.
Well, Larry, imagine for a moment, not that you need to, but imagine for a moment you're trying to lose weight and you say, well, I forewent dessert tonight, and so tomorrow morning at breakfast, instead of having something like just a couple of eggs and a slice or two of bacon, I'm going to load up on pancakes and waffles and danishes. That's essentially what Joe Biden has done with the budget and with the deficit. He allowed some COVID spending to expire, which did reduce the deficit. The problem is he simply replaced it with new spending. And in fact, government spending is at an all-time high today, not just in nominal terms, but in real terms too. In other words, even after you reduce the level of government spending to account for inflation today, it is still at a record high.
So when Fitch reduces our credit rating from AAA to AA+, by the way, AA+, not awful, it's just not as good as AAA. Are they doing that mostly just because of the debt issue and the fact, as you just put it, our currency is not worth what it was when you first acquired it? Or is there also a statement here that they have lost confidence in the leadership of our government to actually fix the problem?
It's both. And, it's actually not even simply a conservative or liberal talking point issue here, because it's not simply the fact that they are saying the government is spending too much money and is going to be incapable of paying it back in the future, which conservatives obviously agree with. But they're throwing a bone, I guess you could say, to the liberals as well by saying that the failure to raise the debt ceiling in a timely manner also factored into Fitch's decision here. Okay. And obviously the liberals are very happy about that because they wanted the debt ceiling raised immediately with no questions asked and no spending cuts.
Didn't Standard & Poor reduce our credit rating about, like 10 years ago?
Yeah, in 2011, actually. And shortly thereafter, they were investigated by the federal government. So we'll see if the same thing plays out here with Fitch. I mean, it is very, very clear that the SEC is full of bad actors. And I would not be surprised if the same thing happens again.
So how does this affect everyday consumers? Does this have an effect on interest rates? Not that there's anything great about interest rates right now anyway. Does it affect the power of the dollar? What will regular Americans feel this?
Well, when it comes to sovereign debt, it tends to be the case that investors move before the credit ratings agencies. And the reason for that is because we're dealing with data that's already publicly available. In other words, investors tend to start selling off these sovereign bonds, these government bonds, or they start demanding higher yields before the credit rating agencies actually make their decision to downgrade the debt. And that's exactly what we've seen thus far this year, with the yields on many U.S. treasuries going higher and higher. And that predated the decision just yesterday by Fitch.
Now, I'm sure you've seen President Biden's campaign statements and his rallies around Bidenomics, how everything's great, and the talking point is Bidenomics is fixing things, Bidenomics is great. So clearly he's not going to do anything to change the direction we're going. Of the Republican candidates right now, is anyone standing out to you, or multiple candidates standing out to you, that actually has a clear message about how to fix things should they win the presidency?
There's a few that do stand out. Vivek Ramaswamy is one of them. He has come out with a very clear plan with actual numbers attached to it, surprisingly, that detail how we need to cut back all kinds of spending, whether it's defense or entitlements, you name it, and how we need to essentially move the Federal Reserve away from being what is essentially a political arm of the executive branch into being an independent organization that actually keeps our currency stable. Donald Trump also has put out a what I think is a fairly clear plan, again, with some numbers attached to it, which is very, very important because so many other candidates, Mike Pence comes to mind, Ron DeSantis as well, have come out with a lot of statements that sound good, but there aren't hard numbers and figures attached to them. So they may have the best of intentions and they may actually have very good plans. They just haven't made them public yet.
Do you expect any move from the Fed? Again, I mean, last time they got together, they raised rates again. Is this the kind of thing, this credit rating issue, something that the Fed would react to?
No, I don't think so. Unfortunately, as much as the Fed says they are data dependent, the record says exactly the opposite. We have inflation, for example, that is still not at the target rate of 2%, and yet the last 2 months, the Federal Reserve allowed the money supply to grow, not shrink. They have paused twice now, and so what I think they're going to do effectively is continue this pattern of pausing and raising by 0.25%, and that's their way to effectively have 1/8 percentage point raises.
By the way, in reading about this, and I've learned quite a bit in our conversation just over the last 10 minutes, I found out China has a A+ rating, which is several notches below where the U.S. is. So, and of course, their economy continues to, well, I understand the central government is propping up their economy by manipulating their currency, and they have slave wages, but still, they seem to be doing okay economically. So it doesn't have that big of an impact in the long run. It's just sort of new for us, right?
Sure, absolutely. And the United States having this AAA rating, frankly, I don't think it's as valuable as many people believe it is. Again, because investors oftentimes are smarter than the ratings agencies when it comes to sovereign debt, and investors tend to move before the rating agencies do as well.
Yeah.
It is very well understood that you can't trust the economic numbers coming out of China, just as it was equally understood that you couldn't trust the economic numbers coming out of the Soviet Union.
Right. Although the way they keep readjusting our economic numbers 3 quarters later, it sort of makes our projections a little dubious too.
It makes you wonder, Larry.
Yes. Not that we're China or the Soviet Union or anything, but I'll leave it there. E.J. Antoni.
Not yet.
Not yet. Research fellow, Center for Federal Budget at Heritage Foundation. Anyone ever tell you look like Vince Colonnese, that radio guy in Washington? Weird.
Once or twice. I'm not sure why, but once or twice.
Yeah, you might want to look into that. Wouldn't wish that on anyone. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. Keep it here. It's Salem News Channel.
And finally tonight, while of course it's very important to focus in on the Biden corruption scandal that seems to be getting worse every day and the ever-growing list of indictments that the former president seems to be suffering from, let's not forget the social war, the culture war. There's still some nonsense going on over there as well. So, today's news. Forget transgenderism, that's so passé. Introducing the wonderful world of transracialism. Let's take a look at this headline really quickly. Inside the online world of people who think they can change their race. Practitioners of race change to another, or RCTA, purport to be able to manifest physical changes in their appearance and even their genetics to truly become a different race. Wow! That's crazy. I mean, you can become a woman and you can become a black woman at that. That's awesome. You're like Plato. You can literally be whatever you want to be. Now, it's funny because transgenderism has been this idea for a long time, right? The last couple of years, it's been told that if you started out as a woman, you could become a man and vice versa. Transracialism, however, is relatively new, at least in this particular context. We've seen 1 or 2 people like this. Rachel Dolezal, a white woman up in Washington State who claimed that she was actually a black woman when in reality she was white, infiltrated the NAACP and actually did some decent work in advancing racial justice in that area. But, she got found out. Turns out you make your race a fake thing and you're out on your butt. This has happened before with Elizabeth Warren, who's pretended multiple times that she's a Native American princess as opposed to a white woman from Massachusetts. They're both pretty annoying, but I would say the white woman from Massachusetts more so. But the thing here is that the response from the radical left towards transracialism seems to be more aggressive. They claim that you can't, in fact, change your race, that changing your race is impossible, that there's far too many things that go into actual race as opposed to sex or gender, which doesn't make any sense because race on its face doesn't actually mean anything other than what you classify it as. Back in the days of the early republic, there was something called the one-drop rule, where if you had one drop of black blood in you, you were considered to be black, even if you didn't look it. So is it based on the color of your skin? Is it based on your ethnic makeup? Is it based on where you're from? Race is very indescribable. It's almost what the left would call a social construct. On the other hand, gender and sex, or whatever we're calling it these days, that's pretty cut and dry. Do you have a penis? Well, newsflash for you, you're a dude. Do you have a vagina, breasts maybe? Do you have the ability to have a child? Well, that probably makes you a woman, and that's not something that you can just make up. But it's weird what they say you can and can't change. You'd think that the social justice warriors would be obsessed with saying that, yes, this social construct is something that you can change, whereas the thing that's actually biologically accurate, no, you have to stay as that. But it's not. Why is that? Is it maybe because there's a political angle to this entire thing? Is it maybe because the fact that the black American voting bloc is a demographic that has gone almost entirely for Democrats, and therefore it's very difficult for you to do anything that would piss them off? And what would be more obnoxious to these particular voters is that saying white women from New York and Queens that think they're not white enough, they want to be black, and they want to say things like, oh, I understand the struggle. Well, that seems like that would be a pretty bad thing to let go. I think that that's the kind of thing we need to realize here. It's all political. Transgenderism is political. Racialism is political. All of this social justice nonsense is political. It's not about actually making people's lives better, as much as the radical left would claim it is. It's more about getting political power. Because what do they do with transgenderism that they can't do with transracialism? When you say that you're a woman, even though you're actually a man, parts and all, it gives you power. You're able to tell that man that says, no, you're not a woman, you're a guy just like me, you're able to get him fired. You're able to garner political support. You're able to garner a base around that. But you can't do that with somebody who thinks they're another race because the actual race themselves is unwilling to accept that as true. The more that we are able to point this out, that the rank hypocrisy doesn't seem to actually connect and that it's all based on lies, the quicker I think we're going to be able to do this. But for the time being, I think it's very funny to point this out. Why can't you be a black woman? You know what? Forget it. I'm Doug Blair, the first black woman host of O'Connor Tonight, and I will see you next time.